What do you want? You got something to say? I think Hollow Knight is f***ing awesome. The art design, the atmosphere, the music, the gameplay, this little dude that hums and brings joy to my heart. Everything that I've seen about this game screams perfection and attention to detail and everything that a game should have. So why can't I get into it? To be clear, I've tried Hollow Knight 3 times at this point. The first 2 were from the same playthrough about 2 years apart, with the third being a new game that I started with the hopes that starting from scratch might help me get into it. Sadly, that was not the case. With each playthrough, I'd start by spending a couple of days exploring, getting into the lore, the gameplay, the fighting mechanics, until I found myself suddenly being blindsided by something else in my backlog or a new game that came out. After that, I would just become uninterested in revisiting it, which really bums me out because Hollow Knight has become this monolith in gaming culture that's constantly heralded as one of the best games that's ever been made. And the worst part is that this issue extends not just to Hollow Knight, but the Metroidvania genre as a whole. I've tried Blasphemous, Metroid Dread, the Ori games, and each time I've had the same issues that I had with Hollow Knight. I start playing, I absolutely love it, and then I get completely sidetracked by some other game. Now, I think that I have an idea as to why that is, and I promise I'll get to that, but first, let's talk about Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. My relationship with Souls games when I was younger was simply non-existent, on account of me being very much intimidated by them. Not only because of their incredible difficulty, but also because when I was a kid I thought they were scary games.
So are we in a boss fight now? Oh no. Oh no.
I couldn't handle playing horror games. And I still can't because I'm a big baby. But scary elements aside, my aversion to Souls games was mostly because of the difficulty. With all of my friends boasting about how difficult the games were, I just couldn't see myself ever being able to actually enjoy them, let alone beat them. So Souls games kind of stayed in the back of my mind where I thought they would stay for the rest of my life. Fast forward to 2018, and after a college-induced video game dry spell, I got my hands on and played through the then brand new God of War. This game single-handedly reignited my love for games and left me wanting more. To this day, I still think that God of War 2018 is the perfect segue to get into Souls games, but that's a completely unrelated topic. With God of War fully mastered, I wanted something more challenging, something with deeper lore and even deeper game mechanics to jump into. And as if Miyazaki himself was listening, Sekiro was announced, and it looked amazing. So I said, you know what, fuck it, let's try it. Let's try something that's actually going to challenge me and possibly open up a whole new world of video games for me to try. So when it came out, I bought it immediately, went home, sat down, and started playing it obsessively until I got my ass handed to me by one of the first bosses in the game, and I quit. Now this could have very well been the last time I ever tried a Souls game in my life, and then Jedi Fallen Order came out. And it was yet another rope that pulled me into the Souls genre, just in time to save me from the torture that was Sekiro. Now, many people, including myself, like to consider Jedi Fallen Order to be a Souls-like, but I think that the Souls game that it resembles the most is definitely Sekiro. Thanks to the amount of mobility it offers and the fast-paced combat, but most importantly, the game's parrying mechanic. While Fallen Order's parrying mechanic is nowhere near as refined as Sekiro's in my opinion, it was good enough for me to practice parrying without losing my mind, thanks in part to the game's difficulty settings. At a certain point, I mentally took on the game as some sort of Sekiro training ground. Before long, I became a parry god, and after actually finishing the game, it was finally time for me to try my hand at Sekiro again. And my training paid off. I was actually better at the game than I was before beating Fallen Order. I started slicing my way through bosses like it was nobody's business, until I got to Genichiro. Genichiro was the real test for me, and another point where I almost gave up. He, to me, was the deciding factor to see if I was going to continue playing From Software games in the future. It took me weeks to beat him, but when I did, it felt somewhat easy. I think this is something that other Sekiro and Dark Souls players can actually relate to, where as soon as you get attuned to the game's mechanics, you enter this kind of flow state, and it's the most gratifying experience that I've ever felt with any other video game. You actually feel yourself instinctively rolling, parrying, and attacking in ways you couldn't earlier in your playthrough. I went through the rest of the game addicted to the mechanics with the sweet sound of parrying ringing in my ears, and I fell in love with it. And the final boss was just the cherry on top. No spoilers, but it is the best and the hardest boss I've ever fought in any video game. By the end of the game, I had a newfound love for the Soulsborne genre, and I went on to play the rest of the games, and I fell in love with each of them. Except Dark Souls 2, I'm sorry. But this established From Software's games as my favorite video games of all time. So you might be asking, why the tangent about Sekiro in a video that's about Hollow Knight? I guess it's because I'm hoping to find what I found in Fallen Order, but within the Metroidvania world. I think the reason why I had originally distanced myself from the Souls genre was not just because of the difficulty, but because I hadn't become attuned to the gameplay. And I think the same could be said for Hollow Knight and the rest of the Metroidvania genre. I believe that Metroidvanias are such an important genre in the world of video games, not only because of the crucial role that they've taken in video game history, but also because they've created an environment where indie developers can flourish and innovate on a genre that we've seen for almost 40 years. I think one of the main reasons why it's become such a trope for innovation is because of the simplicity behind how these games are built. I think that if you compare the original Metroid and Castlevania games to something like Dread or Carry On or any of these newer games, you truly get to see how these developers created something unique while sticking to a standard decades-old formula. And that's the thing, I've had the ability to play Metroidvanias ever since I was born, and I've only been able to play Souls games for a little over a decade at this point. So I think I've locked myself in this weird mental limbo where I'm drawn to these newer, fresher games while distancing myself from this legacy genre, even if I still massively respect it. When I asked my brother, who's a massive Metroidvania head, what he thinks of all this, he said that people that choose to abandon Metroidvania games because they got lost or didn't know how to advance or generally just didn't find the exploration to be as satisfying are the same as people that stop playing From Software games because they find it to be too hard, just like I did. In retrospect, it's so crazy to me that I almost let a difficulty barrier stop me from enjoying a genre that is so rich in lore and mechanics and design and such attention to detail, and I don't want the same to happen to me with Metroidvanias. When Elden Ring came out, it was the first time that I was actually able to enjoy a From Software game alongside everybody else in the community. And it's an experience that I will never ever forget. And with Silksong still on the horizon, I want to open myself up to be able to have that experience again. To jump into a game alongside hundreds of thousands of people and partake in the conversation and excitement that comes around when these types of games come out. So videos like these usually tend to have some sort of grand thesis or statement to make at the end. But if you're watching this, I think that you're either curious as to why people don't enjoy a genre that you so dearly love, or you're like me, where you can't understand why you're not able to jump on the hype train of what seems to be one of the most incredible games of all time. So I'm going to end this video by saying that I'm going to commit to keep trying these games out and hopefully break the barrier so that I can finally enjoy what is probably one of the most beautiful video game genres of all time. And hopefully this video will be the push that you need to keep trying it too. I'll see you at Silksong, and thank you for watching.